post in the Discord.
What?
In our Discord.
They are here.
Oh yeah, we are here. Well, I'm here.
Yeah, I had to. That
there you are.
disappeared.
I'm so glad it wasn't just me like, hey guys, I'm on somebody else's stream. I regenerated last night. This is what I look like now. Dylan's in for a shock.
Surprise. Oh. Okay. Lilith decided she has to lay right in front of me.
I wasn't even giving Alice a choice. She is locked in the bedroom. She isn't even potentially interrupting this. That's what she gets.
Yeah, I don't have a choice. I'm just in the living room. Can't lock her out of it. It's okay. She'll be fine. Yeah. All right, Peter, do you want to do the intros?
Would you like me to do the intros?
Yeah,
this is your book club.
No, you're leading this today. I've decided.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Tea and Tales Tavern book club. My name is Peter and I'm joined by...
I'm Victoria. I don't know who's supposed to go first.
Anybody on Earth. Anybody who's in the chat.
I'm Addie.
Hello, Addie.
And I am Megan, and I wrote this book.
Hello, Megan. And Jam is here too.
Hi, I'm here. I'm just, observing. I'm a ghost. I'm here, but I'm not.
But you're the best ghost. Well, apart from Ghost Pepper.
Thank you.
Who is in chat. Hello, Ghost. So, let's talk a little bit about how this book club started, just for a few seconds. We've been talking about doing this for a while now, on and off in the Discord. And about a month or so ago, Victoria came in and was like, right, we're doing a book club. The first book we're doing is going to be Dreamers Do Lie, and we're going to meet and we're going to discuss the book. And me and Addie were like, okay, cool, let's do it. Just ran with it. Fully didn't ask any questions. We're like, let's go with it. And so we were discussing Dreamers Do Lie and when we were going to do it. And I don't want to take credit for this, but I feel like it might have been me who was like, if only we knew the author. What if we could get the author on? That'd be good, wouldn't it? And that evolved into, let's ask Megan. So we very shyly were like, excuse me, Megan. Excuse me. Please come talk to us. Come play with us. And Megan very graciously said yes. So here we are.
I'm so honored that you guys wanted to have me here for this conversation.
You were we were talking about doing this around Dreamers Do Lie since we've been discussing it, so you were the person we wanted to have the most. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on our book club. Where do we begin? Let's talk about the creation of Dreamers Do Lie, which, if you don't know, is this. I have it here. This is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like.
The mic did not pick that up at all.
Mike didn't pick. Oh, I love that. That's one of my favorite jokes. So, where did Dreamers Do Lie come from, Megan? What's its origin story? Where does it come from?
Well, so many of my novels, this one actually started as a dream. So I woke up one morning having dreamt about a princess on a burning boat. And I believe there was a demon and a warrior fighting over her, like a demon and a knight fighting over her. And that was it. That was the extent of the dream. I didn't know who any of these people were. I didn't know why they were fighting. I didn't know why the boat was on fire. And I thought, that would be a really interesting story if I could figure out what was actually going on in that scene. And so that quest to discover WTF was happening in that dream became this novel and the novel that follows it.
Yes, we should point out this is part one of a two-part series. We're only looking at part one today, so please no spoilies for part two if you haven't read it yet. How did you find these characters, though? Because I mean this in the most lovely way. It's kind of a journey to get from having a dream about them to a finished thing which people can hold and
Well, it's
read.
interesting. It's interesting that you word it that way, as in, like, how did you find these characters? Because a lot of times for me, that's very much what it feels like. It feels less like I'm necessarily crafting a story or creating a world so much as I'm exploring it and figuring out the little details and sort of asking these people, who are you? And what is your motivation and what are you trying to do and how do I put that into words? But one of the biggest influences for me for finding this particular plot was actually Dante's Inferno. And I think I've mentioned this a couple of times before, that this book is essentially a sort of fantasy reimagining of Dante's Inferno. So there's a lot of inspiration for this story from Dante.
Did you go back and read Dante, and how did you decide to make it different from Dante, and what the differences should be to Dreamers Do Lie?
I did. I have probably read Dante's Inferno maybe four-ish times. I've read it again since writing the book, which was actually a really interesting experience. Um, and I read it at the time because I was trying to sort of get a sense of where this sounds really weird out of context, but how he had ranked the sins. So, for anyone who hasn't read Dante's Inferno, the idea is that Dante himself, he is the main character in his own book. Um, he is sort of at a crossroads in his life and he doesn't really know what he's doing. And he ends up lost and sort of falling into a portal to hell. And he is guided by Virgil, his favorite author from the past, who sort of takes him through hell and explains this is how each sin is punished. And so each of the like seven deadly sins is kind of in there, and it talks about how the lustful are punished, and it talks about how the criminals are punished, and all that sort of thing. So I was very much looking for, like, at the time that he wrote this book, what were the sins that were considered to be the worst sins, and how were people sort of supposed to be assigned to different layers of hell according to what society at that time thought about the concept of sin. And so a lot of it was just kind of thinking about how have our more modern ideas about sin and religion changed, because I obviously some of the stuff in Dante is very extremely outdated
Yeah.
as to how they viewed what they would consider it to be a lustful woman, right? Because adultery was a really big deal back in the day, right? And especially if a woman cheated on her husband. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in Dante, but also like lying priesthood was a really big deal. Like Dante was very I believe the I believe the what is it? I can't think of the exact quote now, but like all the devils are here, hell is empty, and all the devils are here. I don't know if it directly comes from Dante, but Dante essentially suggested that the priests were corrupt, that they were speaking for the devil and not for God, because they were all taking bribes and they were all basically trying to buy their way into heaven. And so there's specifically a level of hell where the false like priesthood and the false counselors are all burning in coffins, because was, that was him trying to say to living people at the time, you are corrupt.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. See, that's
Sorry,
why. Oh, sorry, go on. I was going to say that's why I love talking to writers, because that's kind of something I would never have picked up from Dante. And you're like, oh, this is what it means. I'm like, finally, that makes sense. I see it now. I understand.
I could talk about this for like 4 hours, so please don't hesitate to like cut in and be like, we're gonna talk about the next question.
No, not at all. We've got time. We've got time.
But yeah, so I spent a lot of time sort of thinking about, because obviously in Dante there are 9 levels of hell, and there are not 9 levels of hell in my imaginary hell. I believe it worked out to being 7. But I did a lot of delving back into also Greek mythology because they had a lot of physical attributes. There were certain rivers that ran between the mortal world and Hades, the underworld. And so a lot of the physical attributes of the book came from Dante or from Greek myth. The 5 rivers that run through the book are actually all named in Greek myth and take all of their attributes from Greek myth. So that was very important to me to sort of take bits and pieces of sort of this mythology that had been built up over time around the underworld and around Satan and how hell actually worked, but also to put a little bit of a modern spin on it and ask questions like who really decides what a sin is, and how much is guilt, how much does guilt play a role in the condemnation of a soul and things like that. And so it was really important to me not to necessarily perpetuate some of those outdated views, but to sort of take a more modern approach and say, what does it really mean to be damned, and what are the factors that play a role in a soul ending up on that particular journey.
Yeah, you talk about the levels of hell and the rivers of hell. If I may just show the people a little bit. On one of the first pages in the book, there is a map of hell, which you provide, which I was like, actually, that's so helpful. There it is for the people watching at home.
Literally, my very first note that I took was, there's a map! Because anyone who reads fantasy loves a good map.
I drew that map by hand.
Really? It's so good. I wanted to ask you who did it.
I did that. I drew that. It was my first ever map that I made. And I actually learned so much because the first version of the map, from me erasing it, was so messy that I actually had to like create my own light table on a glass table with shining a lamp underneath it so that I could trace it clean onto another thing. I'm at least 50% more likely to buy a fantasy book if there's a map. I do like maps too, I will say.
I also agree. I love a map, something that kind of anchors. For me, reading a book is very kind of ethereal. But if I can see where something is, like, okay, this is here, this is here, this is where the river is, that makes sense in my head more, and I love a map. I am all about a map.
One of the most interesting things about doing my research was trying to figure out exactly how all of these rivers are pronounced, because the layers like Ithilrotha and Jagjaw and all that, those were made up words that I made up. I can decide how they sound. But the rivers are actually all from actual like languages, past languages. So that was an interesting journey to take to figure out how to pronounce all of those.
Which leads us into something I wanted to get to. Let's go into the book, and spoilers abound. If you haven't read the book, we are going to spoil the hell out of it. So this is your last chance to put your fingers in your ears and go, la la la, because please don't click off. So the book starts, and also, I should say right away, I apologize, because I will butcher some of these names, and I am sorry in advance for what will come out of my face. The book starts with a fella called Aramand? Question mark?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Aramand? Yep.
Yes. And he wakes up and he finds himself in hell. Who is Aramand, and how does he get to hell?
Do you want me to answer this question?
Yes. Yes, please.
Aramand is a warrior who is freshly dead. So
R.I.P.
the book The book literally starts with him sort of coming to the slow, sad realization that he is dead. And it actually starts on the boat, the boatman sort of ferrying these unhappy souls. And you don't know much about Armand when he first arrives. The story is sort of about also discovering what he was doing at the time that he died. But he brings with him news of a war that is happening in the mortal realm above. And he sort of uses that information to barter with the souls of hell to find a place, essentially, to do his afterlife, if you will.
Live there to find his way, to make his path. So, Aramand is kind of hanging out with this what do they call themselves? Clans. That's what they call themselves. He kind of finds a clan. And something I wanted to ask about very early on in the book. They go hunting. He has to go hunting. And he finds this creature which is described as having the legs of a deer. And it's got antlers and big floppy ears. And he kills it!
Yeah,
I love that wee creature.
They gotta eat, though. Our man gotta eat.
A man do gotta eat, but that's something I found curious. That again, spoilers for the book. If you haven't read the book, we're gonna spoil the hell out of it. He gets injured on the way while he's hunting this beast. He gets not stabbed in the chest, but like a scar in his chest. Was that a conscious decision of yours to say that people can still feel hunger, still feel cold, still get hurt in hell?
Yeah, so hell isn't a nice place. And so I felt like it was important to establish from early on sort of what the conditions of, these people are. And it's very clear, or at least I tried to make it very clear, that Ethil Rotha, which is where Aramand has ended up, is the outermost layer of hell. So this is sort of the people who are damned by circumstance. So they're not necessarily bad people. They didn't necessarily intend to do really evil, horrible things. But they end up in a place that's not nice, essentially. And so I kind of went out of my way to describe the fact that there's not a lot of greenery here. There's not really vegetables for them to eat, and there's not really things for them to forage. So if they find life in this dead place, they basically have to ravage it in order to survive. They basically have to. It's sort of the sad tragedy of this place that if life does find a way to survive there, they have to come in and essentially wipe it out in order to have any semblance of non-misery. And it's kind of also made clear that these people don't die of starvation. They technically, if they don't eat, they won't die, but it hurts. They suffer a lot. So it's kind of like the place is designed to be their punishment, and just existing there is sort of the punishment that they suffer.
Yeah, one of the descriptions, again, early on in the book, is the nights are windy and chilly and frozen, but the days are swelteringly hot. And they describe it as the Badlands. And one of the things that came into my head when I thought of that was, and I mean this in the most loving way, do you remember the original Star Trek episode where Kirk has to fight the Gorn? And they're in that rocky place? That's exactly what obviously without Shatner in his ripped shirt, but that's the kind of place I imagined this to be.
Very much what I was going for, yeah.
Yes, I'm so glad I got it right. So...
I'm glad I got it right. I described it so that you can see it.
and I saw it. Me and you, Megan. Me and you. We have the brain power. We have big brain energy. So at some point early on in the book, Aramand notices what's described as a fire-haired woman. Who is this lady, and how does she come into the story?
So this is Kaylee, and if you remember sort of my description of the dream that led to the book, this was one of the characters who was who sort of spawned this story. And Kaylee is very special and instantly able to be identified as very special to Aramand and pretty much everyone around her, because they believe that she is not a damned soul. They actually think that she is an innocent person who has sort of been mislabeled or sort of misdelivered. And she has this kind of aura of vitality around her that everyone else lacks, which leads them to believe this about her.
And from your dream, which I'm very curious about, if we look at the book cover, which is on the screen at the moment, how accurate is that character on the book to the character you saw in your dream?
In the dream, I don't remember if she was actually I don't know if I actually even knew what she looked like in the dream, because honestly, when I wrote this book the first time, I'm pretty sure Kaylee was blonde. There's a draft of this book somewhere where Kaylee was blonde haired and blue eyed, and I changed that at some point. But the book cover, which was made by the marvelous Molly Phipps, of We Got You Covered Book Design, I have to plug her because this was our first cover working together, and it's still one of our favorites that we've done. The book cover is very accurate to what I see in my head when I think of her, like 100% accurate to the Kaylee in my head.
And it is a gorgeous cover. I mean, as I said, you can see it there on stream. I was torn between on screen and on stream there. And so Kaylee is being guided around by somebody whose name I know I'm going to say wrong. Iseult?
Yeah, Iseult is how I say it, but I mean, depending on how you count your vowels, yeah.
I am 2 for 2. I am fantastic. I am having a great time. So Iseult is watching over Kaylee because, as you said, they kind of think that she's not meant to be there. So what does Iseult make of Aramand when Aramand starts getting involved in his clan?
Iseult is a very, hopefully this comes through in the book, a very naturally suspicious individual. So anybody who essentially side-eyes Kaylee the wrong way, he's like, I will break you.
Quite right, too.
So he is very hard on Aramand, at first because he doesn't trust him. He doesn't trust anyone. They're in hell. Everyone who is there is by default bad in some way. So it's not an entirely unwarranted suspicion either.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in Escape from New York. You can make allies, but Snake can't really trust anybody in New York.
Exactly.
So what happens after that? Where do Kaylee and Aramand and Iseult go?
So not sure. I'm assuming you just want me to go ahead and say the plot because you already warned people that there's spoilers here.
Yeah.
Basically, after some poking around on behalf of Aramand to confirm the suspicions of the clan as to Kaylee's origins, Aramand hatches a plan with Iseult, which is essentially, we got to get Kaylee out of here. She doesn't belong in hell. She shouldn't spend eternity damned. I know a story about a young gent who we thought was dead. And just when we were about to burn him on the funeral pyre, he miraculously and magically popped back to life with this story of a mad escape through hell, this mad chase, running away from demons. I can get Kaylee out, but in order to do that, we have to go deeper. And this is sort of where the whole Dante's Inferno comes in. We have to take the mad tour of hell to get Kaylee out.
Oops, sorry, my thing broke for a second. Sorry about that. So, and hilarious consequences ensue.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask a little bit about that journey through hell. When you were researching the different levels of hell and the different things through hell, there's a point where one of the main characters kind of RIPs, and they find him later on in a different circle of hell. What?
Yes.
Is that... What am I trying to ask? Like, when you were coming up with the idea, when somebody dies in hell, is that where they go into a deeper level of hell?
Yeah, so if you're asking where that came from, that was me. That came from me. That's not something I found in... Generally, it was accepted within sort of Dante's Inferno or within, Greek mythology that the only way to pass from a level of hell to another or from hell to the mortal world was essentially the grace of the divine, right? Hades has to actually grant you permission, or you have to have some kind of divine permission to move. That was how Virgil was able to guide Dante through hell, because Virgil had been summoned by Beatrice, who is this divine angelic woman that Dante sort of pines for in all of his writing. She may have been based on a real woman that he had a huge crush on in the real world. And so Virgil is able to sort of take Dante through hell because he has this divine grace that allows him to move. But otherwise, essentially in mythology, it was impossible to do these things. And I think personally, one thing that every really good fantasy story needs is rules. There has to be internal consistency to the way things work, because otherwise you can basically throw belief out the window, right? If there's no rules, if you can just do whatever you want all willy-nilly, then what are the stakes? What does it matter if souls can just do whatever the hell they want? And so the idea was sort of that you can go deeper into hell by certain means, but you can't go back the other way. So this was essentially what they were signing up for, was a one-way trip. If you venture beyond the outermost rim of hell, there's no way to get back there. You're going to make your eternity worse, essentially.
And Jam asks an interesting question in chat, which is something I thought I had. This is a big question I had. The question is, did the clan
do
members...
we want Jam to ask her question? Because she is in the voice call.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes, Jam is in the voice call. Sorry.
That's okay.
I am in the voice call, but you could totally just read my question out.
It's okay. You're here.
But yeah, basically, already being in hell and damned and what I would imagine is what is the chillest part of hell, right? The outer rings. I just can't imagine so many of the clan members just wanting to help Kaylee out of the kindness of their heart. I just wonder if there was a part of them, I don't know if some of them or all of them, was hoping it would somehow redeem them and give them like a free ticket to heaven. So I was just wondering what your insight was on their motivation, aside from Kaylee doesn't belong here, let's help her out.
This is a really great question because it plays into a lot of there's actually like whole scenes where there's actually one of my favorite scenes is the night before they actually set off on the Phlegathon, the burning river, to go deeper into hell. Aramant and Iselt sort of meet on sort of this hill overlooking what they've built. And they have this conversation about why they're doing what they're doing and why it feels important to them. Like, it feels like an honorable thing to do. And there's actually a whole back and forth where Iselt was just going to order the clan to do this. He wasn't going to give anybody any choice because he considered himself to be in charge, and you're going to do what I want you to do, was essentially his outlook. But Kaylee kind of put her foot down and said, no, we're screwing over a lot of people, just like Jam pointed out. Like, these people aren't going to get to come back and have what little they have right now. And so she actually made Iselt give everyone the choice. So everyone who didn't want to assist with this journey was actually allowed to step aside and stay behind and find other clans that they could go into. But a lot of the reason why those that stayed was it's that sort of concept of honor that and this is a very mythological thing. If you've read Homer and if you've read the Iliad or the Odyssey, there's this concept of the warrior's honor. Even if the warrior is doomed, Achilles knows when he dons his armor and goes to the field of battle that he will die. He has essentially been told that if he participates in this war, he will have eternal glory forever, but he won't get to live to bask in it. And it's that sort of idea of we can do this thing, and it won't work out for us, but it's still the right thing to do. And during that conversation, sort of between Aramant and Iselt, where they're drinking the water of sorrow like it's whiskey, they talk, and Iselt essentially says, like, where does redemption come from? Does it come from the gods, or does it come from us? Do we earn divine redemption through our actions, or do we have to forgive ourselves? And is this a way that we can forgive ourselves for doing the things that we did in life? And it's a question that Araman doesn't have an answer for, but it's, I think, at the core reason of why a lot of these people decide to do what they ultimately end up doing.
Was it a difficult choice at that point to decide to break up some of the clans and send different people in different directions? And were you thinking about any kind of spin-off? Like, what happened when members went over here? Let's talk about that for a while.
Initially planned for this to be one book, but anybody who's a writer right now is laughing their ass off because you always plan for one book and it almost never happens. So the second book did basically, as things were happening and as characters sort of as stories were sort of spinning off to become unfinished, it definitely, you start to wonder what happened to this person. What happened to this person after he died? Where did he end up? Who, what are sort of the outcomes for all these other people who maybe got left behind along the way out of necessity? And it turned into a book too. So, for me, to answer the core of the question, I think people have this idea that when you kill off a character or when you like write an ultimate end for a character that you're sitting there like laughing gleefully to yourself because you're so evil. But it is always a little bit sad for me if I have to kill a character or sort of write them out and send them on the way, even if they're going to a happier ending. So it can be really tough, especially if you get attached to somebody.
Is so hard to kill a character. Like in everything I've written, I can't do anything. I come up with the idea like I'm going to do something awful to these people just because I can, but I get to the point where I'm doing awful things. I'm like, no, I love you too much. I can't do this anymore. Here, you hurt your toe. Now off you go home. Pat in the head. Off you go.
It's funny because not in this book, but in one of my series, there's a scene that I see Wolf is in the chat, so I'm going to pick on him a tiny bit. He's one of my beta readers. There's a scene where he cried quite a lot, and he wrote me a lot of notes, and he was like, you should name this chapter something along the lines of the death of Wolf because he cried himself to death or something like that. But what I reminded him of every time he teased me about that is like, I had to write that scene and I had to read that scene at least once before I sent it to you. I cried over that scene twice as many times as you did, at least twice as many times as you did. So it's hard, but sometimes it's also necessary. Endings feel the most impactful and the most valuable if they're earned. And so sometimes you have to make your character suffer. For everyone who agrees with that hashtag, please read book 2.
I was gonna say, I have read book 2, so I do know. Hashtag it gets better.
It gets better. I haven't read book 2 yet, so I know nothing.
My lips are sealed.
You guys have to read the second book.
I'd like to ask a little bit about that, though, as incoming as a statement. But as a writer, when you do get upset killing a character, how much of you does want to be like, reverse course, I'll make it better? How do you get around that?
How I get around it is, remember how I said at the beginning of the conversation that I'm not really like creating the story, I'm just kind of finding it. A lot of the times, if I'm like, can I avoid this? Can I prevent this from happening? My characters are like, no, you dumb bitch. This is what happened. This is what you have to write because this is the story. And so I'm kind of in that same boat with the reader in that regard. Like I can't, when I think of things from a mechanical perspective, when I take a step back as a writer, everything that happens in the story has to serve the story. And sometimes a death or a character disappearing or whatever ends up happening, sometimes that's what serves the story. And so ultimately that has to be just kind of the way things go. But you know, even when I'm trying to think of how a story goes, because to me, I never kill a character unless I feel like it has to happen. I never do it for shock value because I think that's cheap. I think anytime you kill a character for just to have a body count, that's people can tell. People can tell that that is that you're just trying to have a big body count. I want it to mean something when somebody dies. I want that to contribute in some way to the overall overarching thing. And so usually what happens if I try to avoid a death and I know I can't is I just feel kind of that pull towards the story needing that thing or towards there being a hole there if I don't. And so inevitably I find myself writing the things which I write. And actually, full disclosure, the ending of Life is But a Dream is one of my greatest sorrows because I did not want it to end the way that it ended. There was a character in this series that I desperately, desperately wanted to redeem, and there was no possible way for the story to include that. It just every way I considered it, I had that tug towards no, this is the ending. This is where it goes. This is what happens to that particular character. And so I've always been sad that certain things work out the way that they do, but sometimes certain things work out the way that they do, and that's how it goes.
Is there a director's cut version vote where you're like, I mean, everything happened perfectly fine. This didn't happen at all. The end. Good night. Yeah.
Nope.
That's just for you to make yourself. No.
No, not even in the vaults of my head. But one thing I do for me, and this has always been true as a reader too, when things get really bad, I'll flip back earlier in the series to a part where everyone was happy and I'll reread it.
It's like the montage at the end. It's like, okay, let's have a flashback scene. This is nice. Happier times.
Exactly. It's like, remember when everybody was sitting around the fire and it was all happy and nothing bad had happened yet? I'll just go back and read that scene.
Which is fair. I think that's fair to do. What we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a break here at the top of the hour. When we come back, we have more questions for our guest, Megan Cutler. Where can people... before we go into this break, where can people find out about you on social media so they can go and say hello to you during the break?
So I am on the platform formerly known as Twitter and also Blue Sky as, I believe I'm just Megan Cutler or Megan _Cutler on Blue Sky, and it's double underscore on the platform formerly known as Twitter. I'm also on Twitch, as has just been shouted out. And if you would like to read some samples of my work, including you can read the first 3 chapters of Dreamers Do Lie for free, you can head over to megancutler.net and see previews for many of my books there. And just all my pretty book covers, mostly made by Molly.
And they are very pretty.
They are. I did a few of my book covers myself. The Eternity's Empire ones were done by me, but the prettiest ones I feel are all Molly. She's amazing.
on your stream a couple times, we've designed, I say we, because we're a team. I did absolutely nothing. I just kind of sat and was sassy in chat. But I've watched you design a couple of book covers, and I'm like, this is a lot more complicated than it would appear. Right, when we come back, more with Megan. Be right back, everybody.
There goes Dylan.
Bye, Dylan. Love you.
All right, we're back.
We're back.
Hello.
Victoria says iHeartRadio. Well, I don't iHeartRadio. You hear me, iHeartRadio? I'm coming for you.
You know what? They didn't give me Taylor Swift tickets, so screw them.
Did they?
No, they didn't.
Oh, they didn't. They didn't. Okay,
did their silly little contest where I had to listen to the radio for 13 minutes for 13 days, and I didn't win a single ticket. So.
What?
I know. I'm mad. But not really, because I went, so it's fine.
You listen to other radio presenters?
At the time I was listening, there were no presenters. It was just music.
Oh. Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
Apparently, you said Great Lakes.
Okay, I was confused at what you meant by, like, oh, you said that. I was like, no, I didn't, but it's the captions, I guess.
It's for captions.
Yeah.
It's for captions. The captions are great.
I think
They're
I
doing
also
great work.
fucked up everyone else's captions. I think you all need your own link, not just the same link for everyone.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Well, if you are just joining us, this is the first episode of the Tea and Tavern Tales Book Club. We are talking to the author of Dreamers Do Lie, Book 1 by Megan Cutler. Megan!
Hello. I'm here.
Megan here! Megan here! So, I want to ask a little bit about splitting the story into 2 books. When did you make that decision, and how did you decide what to save for book 2 as opposed to putting it into book 1?
Well, this was one of the few times where it wasn't a very hard decision because I did know where this book ended right from the start. Actually, this book I wrote using sort of a different method from a lot of my other series. Starting with the series I published after this one, The Celestial Serenade, I had kind of realized, like, you notice there's 3 parts to this book. They're all in one book. Starting with The Celestial Serenade, I kind of realized that what is a single book in my head is usually actually about 3 books worth of story. So I started splitting the singular books into trilogies in my head, and there was a lot more, okay, where are the stopping points and which things should happen in which book. But this one very, very much had an ending point in mind from the start. And so there wasn't really anything that I left out of this one. It was more that just as I was writing it, I discovered, and I think this is kind of true for any story, stories are kind of made up of all these different threads, and the threads are kind of there on their own individually, and you pull them into this tapestry that becomes the story. And at certain points, as we've kind of discussed, some of those threads might get left out of the rest of the weaving, or just not be able to be wrapped up into the finish for whatever reason. You run out of room, you have to focus on something else. It just doesn't feel relevant to the rest of what's going on. And so I found that I had sort of a collection of these threads where I was like, well, what happened to these people? What's the story with that? And so it just sort of grew into the second tapestry so that I could take all of those remaining threads and do something with them and have an ending for them.
And is it difficult to... I mean, there's a part of you which you said is told the story, you find the story, you go through it, and that's the story. But is there a part of you that's like, yes, but also this little bit as well? Or how do you stop at, for example, 2 books or the 3 books in the Celestial Serenade?
Well, as you know, Peter, because you come to my streams, I tried to end the Celestial Serenade, and my characters said no.
Yes,
so now
just
I'm
keep
writing
telling you stories.
Yes, and I'm writing more of the Celestial Serenade because I lost that battle.
You are the Douglas Adams of the modern day, like a trilogy in 5 parts.
Yes. It was funny because one time I was working on, I think it was like book 14 or 15 of the Aravalia Chronicles on stream, and someone came in and I was like, oh, what are you working on? And I was like, yeah, book 15. And they were like, have you ever considered writing anything else? And I just almost died laughing.
It's like, no, this is everything. This is life.
To fully answer the question, I do firmly believe that stories should end at some point. I've read so many really good series that kind of go down the can at the end because you can tell that the author just doesn't want to let go or say goodbye, or they know they're going to keep making money off of it, so they sort of keep keep going. And I've always sort of made a promise to myself that I would never let myself keep something going for that long. So I try to have a definitive end in mind and to say, okay, once this happens, that's sort of everything that's happened. But it's really hard because you get invested in these lives. And I mean, in the cases of the Celestial Serenade and the Arvalia Chronicles, those are generational stories. I mean, some of the main characters eventually have children, and so the story could just keep going, theoretically. Um, so what I kind of do to get myself out of the cycle of just endlessly writing the same things over and over is spin-offs. So I do have a couple spin-offs planned. I don't know how many people have dipped their toes in the Arvalia Chronicles yet, but specifically, there's a character in there named Silkfoot Lightvolt who has been very popular, who's going to get his own book series in the future. So that will allow me to explore other aspects of that world without having to stick to the same main cast of characters or main settings, as a way to keep going back to the world, but also to keep doing something new. But I think just at a basic level as a writer, the way to get away from just writing the same thing forever is to just always challenge yourself to do something new, to just always be. I think it was David Bowie that said you should always be just a little bit beyond your comfort zone in order to make your best work. And I sort of live by that philosophy. I'm always pushing myself a little bit more into new territory, a little bit beyond where I feel comfortable to try and find the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
That leads to an interesting question, because you do write a lot of high fantasy and sci-fi novels.
I do.
If it attracts you to that genre over, say, a more Earth-based romance or something of that nature?
It's a hard question to answer. I mean, I've always sort of read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, so I think by default I go there. But I this is gonna be the nerdiest. Just strap yourself in for the nerdiest answer you've ever heard. I think it goes back to when people get asked about Star Trek and why Star Trek ended up being such a special thing and why so many people are drawn to it. Both the people who made that show and the people who are fans of that show talk about this sort of quality of Star Trek, of how it evokes this idea of hope for the future, this idea that humanity can come together and can create something beautiful if we just stop fighting with each other for like 10 minutes. And there's, I think, this beautiful quality about it that's really hard to put into words, because I don't know if we have like a specific concept other than hope for the future that really gives voice to it. But I feel like I'm always, the type of fiction that I read and the type of fiction that I write is always searching for that feeling, that idea of the world can be beautiful, we can create something beautiful, we can do these beautiful things, if we believe in the inherent good in people, or if we come together in a difficult circumstance, or whatever. And so I feel like I'm always chasing that. I fell in love with Star Trek as a teenager, and I was, mystified in the same way that so many other people have been with this idea of the Federation and just being able to go out there and learn new things and do these great deeds, just normal people. Because that people can talk about how, like Kirk was a hero or whatever, but these are just ordinary people that went out in space and found super powerful aliens and had to deal with that shit.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm always chasing that. I'm always chasing that same feeling that I had when I was watching those shows, and so those are the kinds of stories that I'm always telling, because I'm always looking for that same feeling, that same kind of magic that I felt my very first episode of Star Trek, which was when Data made his daughter.
Lol.
That was my very first episode of Star Trek that I fell in love with.
That's her name, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know. The character's name is Lal. I'm not just going lol in a weird way. That's the character's name.
I thought
That
that's
is her
what you
name,
were
yes.
doing, because I've never seen Star Trek.
Yeah. I'd like to ask this, though. You say you're chasing this kind of feeling in all your works, and you are prolific. You have a lot of works out there and stuff you're working on which hasn't been released yet. Have you found it? Or have you gotten... What's the closest you've gotten to it?
I feel like I do find it. I feel like it's incorporated in every climax that I write in some form or another. This is one of those things where like it's hard to put into words because when you think about it, you don't really think about it. It's like an emotional concept that you think about. You don't really think about it in like a solid words.
Mm.
For me, I kind of have this conversation with Ghost Pepper sometimes. There's subgenres of sci-fi and fantasy that are grimdark, right? And I think Game of Thrones is a good example of that, where it's really gritty and people are always sort of hovering on the edge of hopelessness. And it's not my type of fiction. It's not. I read to escape. I want a world that is slightly less crappy than the world I live in. And some people really enjoy that dark, gritty. I mean, I think grimdark really comes from things like Warhammer 40K, which is like so over the top grimdark that it comes back to being almost humorous in its nature. But you know, some people really enjoy that, and I think that's great. But for me, I wanna read stories where the heroes win and things work out for people. And so those are the unabashedly the kind of stories that I write. And I think that people always say, you know, your stories and your characters, they're all a part of you, and that's definitely true. There's part of me in there's part of me in all my heroes. There's a part of me in all my villains. But I think that, you know, things working out in the end is also a way for me to say to myself, hey, you know, things can work out in the real world too, maybe at some point, hopefully, maybe, I don't know.
At some point, it'd be lovely.
I feel weird saying that today in the context of this particular month of history.
Yeah.
So maybe
like in
50
years, when when people watch this back, we'll be like, wow, they still had hope. That's a lovely idea.
Yeah, maybe that comment will age better. But I mean, during the really heavy times of the pandemic, I mean, I just leaned into what I was writing because, you know, I didn't want to deal with the seemingly endless lockdown. You know, it was a way for me to escape into another world and to see people doing things and living their lives.
It's interesting you mentioned the pandemic because you put Dreamers Do Lie out about halfway through 2020, I believe June 2020, July 2020.
Was it 2020 that it came out?
Let me check. It says here 18th of June 2020, according to Amazon UK.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So
I had been planning the release of that book. Okay, I remember now. This is like the chaos portion of my life. I had meant to put that book out a year earlier, but we moved into this house. And so a bunch of stuff was delayed from 2019 into 2020. So the book Dreamers Do Lie was finished prior to that. But it just so happened that was when I was able to get it out the door.
Yeah. And as you said, you were leaning into more writing during the pandemic. And so my question is, did the release of Dreamers Do Lie help you during that?
It didn't really. This is a weird disconnect, sort of, if you're an indie author, is that at least for me, the things that I finish them so far ahead of when I put them out that I'm usually on to the next thing. So during the pandemic, I was very heavily working on Aravalia Chronicles. That was like my main, and I think I was finishing off the Eternity's Empire series as well. So I think those were the two things that I was really sort of deep into. So it didn't really affect my writing, but Dreamers July was really kind of the launch of my solo publishing career because my series that I put out before that, Mystical Island, was actually co-written between me and a friend of mine. So this was sort of my first me taking off and sort of going in my own direction and finding my own thing and sort of figuring out what kind of author I wanted to be. And so it's I mean, technically the Mystical Island, the Island of Lost Forevers is technically my first book, but this is often the book that I think of as my first.
This is a
My first real
crazy
book.
first book, like by yourself. Like it's so good.
Thank you.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
especially because like I read this, I guess like closer to 2021-ish, and then I reread it for this. And so I already knew kind of like the big twist that comes with it. And so getting to reread it and seeing all this like the foreshadowing you could put in. And so now hearing that like, oh, this is your first solo book, I'm just like, Megan, you're incredible. Like what the hell?
I'm just so glad to hear you say that, though, because I did very specifically. I wrote this book in a way that if you come back and read it a second time, it should be even more enriching because there are so many seeds that can go just unnoticed the first time because there is a big twist. I don't know if we're planning on revealing the big twist, but there is a big twist in this book.
Oh yeah, we could definitely talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the. I mean, as we said, we're spoiling the hell out
Yeah.
of book one. Book two, not so much. But book one, everything goes. Everything's on the table here.
Yeah. So, do you guys want to reveal the twist, or do you want me to do it?
I think you should do it.
I want you to do it, please.
Okay. So the twist for this book, this is your last chance to cover your ears and hum loudly if you don't want to hear it. Is that Aramand is actually the devil in disguise throughout the entire book. He comes to hell in the guise of a damned soul in a human form. He's a completely unreliable narrator throughout. But there are some very specific little ticks in there that I hope in retrospect are giveaways for the fact that he was lying the whole time. And as soon as Aramand leads Kaylee and Estelle and their party beyond sort of the safe haven that they start in, they are instantly attacked by and pursued by a demon by the name of Maril, who actually turns out to be Kaylee's mortal lover in disguise, trapped in a demonic form by Aramand himself. Ooh, I would love to know the answer to that question. I
That
would
is a
love
great
to hear
question.
that.
That's a great question, Joe.
Yeah.
Can I give my answer? Because...
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say they got into the city, I guess the second ring, and I stopped trusting Armand. So they had to fight alleged demon Moral, and the group gets separated. Eventually, Armand makes it back to their ship and realizes that, like, you know, Haley and the others haven't made it back. And the moment he was able to find them and then lead them all back to the ship, no problems. Stop trusting that man. Because what the fuck? And also, like, everyone else in the group still trusts him and thinks he's a noble soul until like, I think I marked it, page 210.
Yeah, it's like
I felt like I was being gaslit the entire time. I was so angry.
Man, you caught on pretty quick then, because I think the first time I read it, like, I did not see it coming. I was, like, I'm what they call, like, a dummy reader, where I'm just, like, I'm along for the ride. I'm not trying to figure shit out. I'm just, take me where you want, I will go. And so, I was right there with Kaylee. I was like, what the hell's happening? What's going on?
Yeah, for me, it's just like, you have too much luck in hell. That can't be right. And then the character, Dale, I believe his name is, he upset me because it's like, you know there's something wrong here, but you're being passive-aggressive about it. And, like, I was happy he was on my side.
Yeah.
But I wish he was, like, I don't know, punched Armand in the face or something.
Thale is so interesting because, like, rereading it, I'm like, Megan was literally telling us point blank what was happening. and it was still like whoosh right over my head. Like, oh my god, so good. I love this book so much.
I just have the biggest grin on my face right now from all of this.
You know the point where I realized you couldn't trust him, and I've actually pulled out the paragraph here, and I'm going to read it. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about the beast he captured. It says here, he hated to kill a defenseless creature, but necessity compelled him. With one swift slice, he slit its throat. Just the callousness of, oh, I hate to kill you. So quick. That's when I was like, you can't trust this man. He's clearly got some kind of issue going on. There's something that's not right in his head.
So I also have like another question, but after.
So this might completely blow people's minds because I don't know if anybody picked up on this. But one of the biggest clues about Armand is so subtle. And it's that once Kaylee realizes how she feels about him, she tells him that she loves him like numerous times. Armand never once says it back. Never once. And I was very specific in my dialogue choices for how he responded to her.
I thought he was just being an asshole.
I think
just being a typical man.
Moral points that out, though.
Well,
like,
here's...
But I didn't pick up on that until he pointed it out. I was like, oh, shit.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Just to, like, delve a little bit into, again, like, the back end, my very first draft of this story was quite a bit different. And I let a friend of mine read it, and he pointed out that he was able to tell that the twist was coming quite early on, and he felt like that was detrimental to the book. And I have this conversation with people a lot where they're like, well, if I want to write a twist, how do I prevent people from figuring it out? How do I obscure? How do I hide? And one conversation that I have to have a lot of times with authors that I edit for, and that I just tell people flat out whenever we have this conversation, is some people are going to figure it out. Some people are going to be like, wait a minute, this guy can just walk through this level of hell without getting mugged? What the fuck? And I can't prevent that from being noticed. Like, you can't prevent everything, because there has to be clues. In order for the twist to work, in order for the twist to feel good, some people have to be, like, and especially in retrospect, you have to be able to go back and see, oh, that was a clue and that was a clue. And so the idea of, like, twists just coming out of nowhere, it doesn't really work. The mystery has to have build-up. And so the philosophy that I had when I went back and edited the book and sort of redrafted it was, some people are going to figure this out, so how do I sow doubt? How do I sow doubt in that percentage of people who are noticing all the clues but might not have made a decision yet? And so that's where Morrill sort of comes in as either the voice of reason or the voice of doubt, depending on which side you're leaning. And he tries so hard to point out to Kaylee all of these things that have been sewn into the book for notice. And so I really just kind of tried to do here's two sides of an argument, you decide who's telling the truth for the revised version. And I feel like it worked really well, because clearly it came through for some people, and other people were just like, wow, damn, I didn't realize that was going to be the thing.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same as Victoria. Like, I was reading through it, and there was a few points where I was like, this guy's just strolling through hell. But then earlier in the book, you mentioned about him having armor and a cloak, and I was like, maybe people just don't want to mess with him. So maybe he's just a big boy. Maybe that's why he's okay.
There was another question, wasn't there? A follow-up question?
Yeah. So, like, related to reveal, so we have Thale, who's doubting Armand the entire time. And I was confused, like, if he doesn't trust him, why is he on this journey at all? Like, he's part of the reason why the entire clan went on this, well, not the entire clan, but a lot of people went on this journey, right? Because he confirms the story that Armand gives them. But the entire time, it's very clear he's doesn't like Armand, doesn't trust what he's saying and how he has all this knowledge, but he's still with them until almost the very end. So I was wondering, like, what is his thought process during this entire journey? Why is he still there?
I don't want to say too much because I think I don't always remember what order things happen in, but I think Thale's story is much, much more expanded in the next book. He's one of the characters that actually spawned the second book. But it is true that Thale does know the whole time what he's dealing with, and I think he felt limited in his capacity, knowing what he knew and knowing. I'm a writer. I know words real good. Knowing what Armand was capable of, I think he was afraid to step too far over a line, and so he tried within his limited capacity to draw attention to what he could without obviously bringing down the wrath of this extremely powerful being that he was sharing quarters with.
I'd like to ask a little bit, looking at book one as a whole. What's your personal favorite part of it? Like, if you weren't you and you picked up the book and said, "Oh, here's a book dreamers do lie," what bit of the book would you like the most?
Such a hard question. But I really like the last chapter. Because one other thing that I think a conversation that I have with a lot of people is growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a certain role that women played in fiction. And I think there was that whole, like 90s girl power movement. And, we had shows like Sailor Moon and all that. And so we were starting to get, Xena Warrior Princess, stuff like that, where we were starting to see powerful women in positions. And yeah. But there was still a lot of that holdover, right? All these fairy tale stories of how, women need to be rescued from the dragon in the tower, and that's sort of the role that women play in fiction. And as a writer, as a young writer, sort of growing into adulthood and sort of looking at the kind of stories that I was telling, I started to realize this, right? That even sort of subconsciously, I would write my women a certain way because that was just sort of the role that when women get kidnapped, that's the role that they play in the story, right? And so the end of this book is very much one of the ways that for me, I was sort of breaking free of that mold and showing that you don't need to have a sword to be the big badass hero. And so again, spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the book, cover your ears, but the sort of second twist of the book is that Kaylee returns to hell after Morrill frees her because she can't abide the idea of the man that she loves being trapped forever in hell. That was why she went there in the first place. And she sort of falls into the devil's trap. He had sort of wanted to wed her so that he could breed an army of demons that would be capable of crossing into heaven. But because of what she learned from her first journey through hell and the mechanics of the world and how it worked and the story from early on about this young man who popped back to life because his magic was keeping him alive, she totally screws the devil over. And right before he's able to marry her, she wakes up in bed and he had no clue. He was completely blindsided. And so for me, that moment of power from a woman doing a complete reversal of sort of the traditional trope, like for me, I love that shit, and I'll always love that shit. So I feel like that would be, there's so many really great moments in this book overall, but I really like the fact that in the end she's the one who stuck it to him and she was the one who won.
Yeah, she definitely gets the one up on him, and it makes me think of something we've discussed on your stream many times, Captain Janeway. Like, you can sense a lot of that kind of inspiration, somebody who fights back and will not take their position in life as it is and is like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, screw your plans, this is my plan.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I do feel in retrospect Voyager has not aged well. But at the same time, Voyager was the Star Trek that was coming out when I was in high school. Janeway was my captain. And I really liked her in a lot of ways for a long time. Now, again, in retrospect, looking back on that show and some of the things that they decided to do with that show weren't necessarily the best choices. And there are episodes where Janeway is kind of just full on crazy.
Yeah.
But I do think, again, it's an example of that, one of the early examples of, you know, a woman in a position of power being a badass. And I definitely do like to, and very specifically too, like I have my female warriors that go out there and they cut things to pieces and they do the big battle magic and all that. But I also like to still show women being more traditionally feminine and still having power in that field and power in that domain in a way that is equal to the power of men. And so Kaylee is very much, at least in the first book, she's very much that traditional damsel in distress princess who's been sort of taken, but she always has agency. And that was something that was really important to me, was that, you know, there's never a point in time. She sometimes gives up her agency early on in the book out of innocence to Armand because she doesn't realize that she's following someone who hates like someone that doesn't hate her but is using her. But like it's very important to me that even when my characters are in distress, male or female, that they have some form of agency that they can act on. And so this book is, there's a lot of sort of corruption of the expectation, and which is a thing that I greatly enjoy doing with my work.
I'd like to ask a little bit about something this is a question we came up because we came up with a whole bunch of questions. We've touched on 2 of them so far. So question 3. This is one of my favorite questions. Someone comes into your big Hollywood office, puts the book down, gives you a blank check and says, make this a movie. So you, Megan Cutler, you are making this movie. Obviously it's your story, but
God, okay.
Where do you begin? Casting, sets, characters, what do you... And you can have it in as many parts as you... Well, somebody says make it a property, so do you make it a movie? Do you make it a mini TV set? Where do you...
I feel like
where
a
do you
TV,
start?
I feel like it would have to be a TV series. I feel like you can't do big epic fantasy stories as movies unless you're going to do the like 12-hour version like they did with the Lord of the Rings. I just don't think. I'm gonna be so bad at answering this question though, because I don't have a dream cast for this book. I have no idea who I would cast. If you ask me who I would cast as any of my characters, I have one answer for one character in one series, and that's if I could, I would cast Jason Momoa as Dameron. And I have no other answer for like anything else. But I feel like it'd have to be a TV series. I feel like I would have to find someone who actually knows how to write a script, because I do not. I know that TV and books are very different creatures. So I feel like my answer would be find someone who can explain to me WTF I've gotten into, because I don't. It's a very deep rabbit hole and I don't know. I do think it would have to be, I very firmly my fiction is character-centric fiction, so I would have to center on finding people who could embody those characters and finding a way to adapt the story that it stayed true to the characters and what they were going for, even if the plot had to change in certain places. I feel like that would be, but I definitely I would need somebody, because I understand novels. I can watch a movie and be like, that was a good movie because blah blah, or that was a bad movie because blah blah blah, but I don't know how to make one. I don't know the first thing about making one.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the casting, because you said Momoa, and I can absolutely see Momoa as Aramand. Like, when I was reading that character, I was like, I can absolutely see this as Momoa. But for somebody like Iseult, I saw a kind of older man, someone almost like Charles Dance, is it, from Game of Thrones?
Oh, very much, yeah.
Although I couldn't see, even looking at the last on the cover, I couldn't see an actress for character's name's gone completely out of
For
my head.
Kaylee? I think,
Haley.
I think
Haley,
Karen
I'm so
Gillian
sorry.
would be so fun.
Oh yes, okay.
Oh,
Karen
for
Gillan.
sure.
Like, just her sass.
I
Oh, she'd be so fun.
I'm so weird because I think that a lot of writers, like, the first thing they do when they come up with a new project is like, this is my dream cast for the book, and I just don't do that. Like, I see my characters very vividly in my head, but they don't. There's again, there's only been one time where I was scrolling through, like, the internet at large, and I did almost die of a heart attack because I was scrolling through Tumblr and I found a guy who looks exactly like Damarin looks in my head. Like, to the point where I backed away from my chair, and I was like, did he become real? What is happening right now? And it's
Has some kind of weird book thing
Hmm.
happened where my brain has become reality?
right. But it's Martin Sizemore, actually. I think I can get a picture of him.
So-
He's a model.
Okay.
And when his hair is long, he looks exactly like Damarin looks in my head. It's insane. So
He is your grumpy elf boy.
Here's a picture. This is exactly the picture. I was scrolling through Tumblr and I came upon this picture and I did a double take and I was like, Damarin?
You might have to send it to me or Peter because I think links are blocked.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll send it to you.
So again, going back to putting it into production, would you want? Because I mean, we discussed a lot of movies in the past, Escape from New York and whatnot. Would you want it to be more kind of practical sets, or would you want something more kind of CG? How do you see the look of the show being?
Oh, I am a huge believer in practical effects. Like, as much practical, I believe that special effects should be enhancement as much as possible. There would have to be a lot of CG fire in this series, though, because they do spend a significant portion of it on a lake that is literally on fire. I think traditionally in Greek mythology, the Phlegathon, which is the river of fire, is a boiling river. It's not necessarily on fire. It's more like a lava river, but I went literal fire. It's literally water that is on fire. So there would have to be a lot of CG effects for those scenes, for sure.
I don't know. That sounds like an actor problem, not an us problem.
Yeah.
Well, you know.
You know, earn
That's why you
your dollars here.
hire
So
someone.
on
Yeah.
the boat.
We're here to dream
Exactly.
big.
Yeah.
That's our job.
And
about-
would you want to keep the
Do
story?
you guys
Sorry.
have, like, a dream cast for, like, do any of you have people that you would want to see as these characters?
I think Addy pointed out in chat that Addy saw Florence Pugh as Dwenba, which I can kind of see. I can see that big time. Yeah. I mean, as I said, Momoa as our
Armand.
I'm sorry, I'm losing it.
It's
As
fine.
Armand,
Words
yes.
are hard.
They
Yeah.
are.
Which is so hard. What about you, Victoria?
You know, I was gonna go through and like look for people because I obviously knew we had this question. I was too busy dying. I didn't have time.
It's hard.
It is.
It is hard, especially because I feel like you need someone or like a cast that looks almost kind of ethereal. Like you can do a certain
Yeah.
amount of that in post-production, but I wouldn't want to put that much post-production on it. I'd want them to have that kind of look.
I
While
will
filming?
say Armand after the reveal as Lucifer, Lee Pace is Lucifer 130 million%.
I can see
That
that,
would
yeah.
never happen because he's so famous, but Lee Pace would make a just chef's kiss 100% Lucifer.
Who was the guy who played Lucifer in... Was the show named Lucifer? It was
Yeah.
on... Yeah.
Yes.
Who was that who played Lucifer there?
What
Tom
was his
Ellis?
name?
Tom Ellis.
Yes.
Yes. He would be... I feel like
I
he's
would
more
take
kind of a
him-
smarmy devil.
He embodies the Lucifer that I was going for a
Yeah.
lot as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would take him for sure.
He did so good.
You'd have to have longer hair, but
But we can make
pull
that
it
work.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love it if it was a musical. That would be amazing.
Yes. See, Jam has just unlocked something here. Can we... You've written music, Megan. How quickly can we get this done?
No, I have not written. I've done maybe some lyrics every now and then. Again, we would have to hire so many people.
So that's a very good question. If you were to adapt it as a musical, who would you want to bring in as a lyricist or musical writer?
I'm not enough of a theater nerd to answer this question.
This is a flutter question.
I don't feel this is or like Rai Rai or Woof.
Or Rai Rai.
If whoever Woof says I should hire, because Woof is my Woof is my musical nerd.
You know who would be good for it, and they came into my head immediately when I saw the question? You know the guys who wrote Avenue Q and Book of Mormon with Trey Parker and Matt Stone?
Yeah.
Those guys? But I almost worry they're too musical comedy. Although I imagine they can write any kind of music, but because Avenue Q and Book of Mormon are so comedy based, I wonder if they could create more serious lyrics.
Yeah, this is beyond my wheelhouse, I think.
We're trying. We're getting there. I want to ask another question from our list of questions, and this is another one of my favorite questions. See if you can imagine who came up with this question. If you, author Megan Cutler, had to fight one of the characters in an old-timey boxing ring, who would you choose, and who would win?
This is hard because I feel like pretty much all of them would beat me. The character I most want to punch in the face is obviously Armand, but if I old-timey box with him, I would 100% get demolished.
I feel like with this book it's hard.
Get him on the ropes in your silk shorts and your mustache with Scott Joplin doing the old-timey piano in the background. It'd be great. It'd be fabulous. Give him a rope-a-dope.
Because I feel like the other character that I would most be like, okay, I need to fight this guy is Iselt. But again, he might be an old man. He would still beat the ever-loving crap out of me.
You know who I think would have a really good time doing this and wouldn't take it too seriously is Salmon? Did I say that right?
I need to see his name because I can't.
Soulard, sorry. Soulard.
Soulard, yeah.
Yes. I think he'd have a good time with the boxing.
Yeah, there were a couple of chameleons and Soulard in them. I think those would be the fun ones to do the boxing with.
Could be quite fun. So we're going to talk about you as if you're not here, Megan. So please carry on. As you were, pretend you're snooping. So this is questions for Victoria and Addie and Jam from the book club. Question 1: how much did you know about this book before picking it up?
Sorry, I broke the questions.
It's okay. The questions deserve to be broken. There we go.
Well, I mean, I already said I've read the book already.
Yeah.
So.
And this.
I would say I knew it existed, and I knew Megan wrote it, and that's it.
And as I said earlier, the whole point of this book club was so we could talk about Dreamers Do Lie, because it's something we've talked about doing for a while. So again, I knew it existed, and it's one of those things I always meant to get, but I hadn't gotten to it yet. Because what was the book I bought? I bought The End of All Things, book 1, and I really enjoyed that. So having gotten to know Megan, I knew Dreamers Do Lie as a series, but I hadn't read it before we did the book club. Question 2: how did the book make you feel? Did it make you laugh, cry, or cringe? Again, pretend you're not here, Megan. We're just going to talk about you.
Jam, you want to go first?
Sure. It made me really frustrated. Because, I mean, again, like, I caught on pretty early that Armand couldn't be trusted, and they were trusting him. And then when Kaylee said she loved him, I wanted to shake her, but I couldn't. And eventually, like when she kills herself to get back, I'm like, why are you dooming the entire world for this one man that you love? Like, it's very noble. Love that for you. But what's your backup plan here? And like, luckily, her plan worked. But like, what if it didn't? Then what happens?
That's a
And
good
so,
question.
like, I did enjoy the story a lot. I wanted to shake so many people.
I mean, that's the sign of like a good story is when like you actually care so much that you're just like, I need you to do the thing. If you're not going to do the thing, why bother? Because like if it wasn't a good
Exactly.
story, then you'd be like, I don't care what happens to you. But like when you actually feel that frustration, so like I tried rereading all of it before today, but then I got really sick for the week. I literally took it with me on the train to the Eras tour. I read it on the train. I read it at the train station. So Megan, you were probably one of the few authors who can say your book has been to the Eras tour because it was in
This
my
book
jacket
saw
pocket.
Taylor Swift before I did.
I had to like sneak it in. It was a whole thing. So I got to the part where like Kaylee is slowly figuring it out. And I'm just like, girl, come on, hurry up and just trust him. Like, it's fine. Stop dragging your feet. Airman doesn't need to find you anymore. Just leave him in the dust. Come on.
Right? Like the whole walk when Moral finally captures her, like quote unquote captures her, and like they're talking and her memories are coming back. I'm like, girl, what the fuck?
Yeah, I'm like,
Mom
so
can't be trusted. What are you doing?
I'm like, you're saying that like you kind of trust him because like you're like, yeah, it sounds right, sure, but also this other guy who I've known for like a month and is kind of sketchy. I think I love him, which by the way, I don't know anyone who's like, I love this man after a month of knowing them. But
I mean, I can see how it happened for her because I was thinking about it like up until that point. Like, I feel like he only ever showed Kaylee like his really good side, and
yeah.
so he just seemed like this really noble and charming man. But it's like, I don't know. Look at the other context clues, Kaylee. What's going on around you?
Question 3. Do you have any favorite quotes or passages you would like to share?
I just want to say that I enjoyed that whole conversation. It was so legit, all of it. I legitimately appreciated the what are you doing risking like the whole world for one guy because that is such a legitimate perspective.
It is so accurate. Yeah, favorite
That's like-
quotes or passages.
Fantasy books in a nutshell. What crazy thing am I gonna do in the name of one dude's honor?
And also, I'd like to include
Exactly.
you in this question, Megan. Favorite quotes or passages you'd like to share?
Gosh, it's been so long since I read this.
Also, I kind of have a side question on this similar to favorite quotes and passages. It's just a quick question. Trying to find the bit here. Give me just 2 seconds.
Just frantically scrolling through the book right now.
Jam, do you have one that you want to share while Peter's looking for his thing?
I'm looking through the notes I made. Give me a second.
Right, I'd like to ask a little bit about Kimuli. Did I say that one right?
Yes.
Yes, I am 4 for 4 here. I'm doing fantastically. Is Kimuli Scottish?
I need to open my notes. I mean,
Because-
he's not specifically because Scotland doesn't exist in this world.
Right.
So, I mean,
So he's whatever copyright-free version of Scotland exists in this world.
I think there was definitely, I mean, a lot of the world that they come from was based on like early English and like European sort of cultures.
Mhm.
So, I mean, and a lot of the people from Clan Verilia were like dead for a long time. So it's entirely possible that he would have had a very similar culture,
Yeah.
for sure.
Because just reading through the way you've written it, like his line here, seems you already got a sword. And make sure you keep up. Like, I can hear them in Scotland because you specifically wrote Y-E-H. Make sure you keep up. So I was wondering, is he Scottish? Do we have a Scottish boy in hell? Represent.
I mean, if you're happy for that to be canonically true, then sure.
Yeah, I want our boy to be in hell. That was a weird thing to say. Yes, favorite quotes or passages to the people.
Okay, so I don't have one. Like the closest I can get is two words that Moral said is it was after he got Kaylee and trying to explain that like Armand can't be trusted and like trust me, I know you better and here's all the reasons why. And it got to a part when Kaylee was saying like Armand explained all his knowledge and Moral said, did he? And I highlighted that. So I was like, yes! I'm right!
Victoria, do you have one?
I'll say, Addie says that she likes the early story that Kaylee tells, chapter 7. And I was also going to bring that up because that was in my notes. Because as I was reading it, because, like, it was a few years since I had read it, I, like, knew vaguely what happened. And so as I was reading it, I was like, Megan literally tells us what fucking happens. Like, in black and white. And so I think that was, like, one of my favorite parts of just...
I needed the backstory without info dumping.
It was just such a clever way of doing it.
Yeah, I love ways like that when it's not info dumping, when it's done in such a good way.
Like, all my notes are me going through and, like, finding all the foreshadowing. Like, even on page 52, I have, like, how Armand was, like, describing Kervala and stuff. And it's like, oh, well, his knowledge sounds like it belongs to a scholar, not a soldier. And I was like, girl, that's so smart. What the hell? Because that's not something that, like, I would have picked up on. And it's just, like, the way that he describes things, like, he knows a lot about, like, the architecture. I'm like, what soldier gives a shit about the architecture? Like, they're not going to think about that. So it's just, like, little hints like that. I'm just like, oh. In love.
Did you find one you like, Megan?
So there's a couple paragraphs. Let me just read. This is right at the end of part 1. This is sort of what I arrived at. So, a heart pounding in her ears, Kaylee lifted her chin. Her blood turned to ice. A familiar demon stood among the figures at the top, mouth open in a vicious grin. It was larger than the rest of them, and they cheered its arrival, the conquering general come to lead the army. It gathered all 4 of its powerful limbs beneath it, and Kaylee's heart lodged in her throat as the demon leapt. It plummeted with all the grace of a boulder, splintering several planks as it crashed onto their ship's main deck. And then at the beginning of the next chapter, it says, the collision rocked their small vessel, spilling several crew members over the rails. Araman stumbled but quickly caught himself against the doorframe, adrenaline surging through his veins. Flames splashed across the deck, leaving long bands of fire in their wake. Wood popped and sizzled as it burned. The ship's frame creaked as the demon rose to its hind legs. Many of the remaining crew panicked and fled below deck. The rest had the presence of mind to draw their weapons. This was the dream. That scene right there, that was the dream that made this book happen.
So that's the origins.
That is the concept to become concrete right there.
I just want to ask, can you just
like in that dream, in that moment of like such an intense fight? Because I mean, I would feel like that's a nightmare, and then like a fun one maybe when you wake up and talk about it, but like in that moment, that sounds horrifying.
It was, if I remember, sometimes my dreams are like third-person observation, and sometimes they're like I am in them, and this was a third-person observation dream. Like, I wasn't there, I was just kind of watching it happen, so it didn't feel as visceral to me as, like, I have had dream, like, I had a dream, very specifically, it's such a stupid dream, that I was in a truck that was driving through a cave hunting vampires, which makes no sense. But we were like literally, I don't know how this works, but we were literally driving a truck, shooting out the back to try and prevent the vampires from getting us. And that one I was in, and that was a lot more visceral and a lot more terrifying because they were like flying at me and I was shooting a gun.
Addy asked a question in the chat. Going to your dream, was Aramand originally the warrior, or was he the devil from the beginning?
In the dream, I genuinely didn't have a lot of details from the dream. I knew that Kaylee was a princess in the dream, and I knew that the demon and the warrior were fighting over her, specifically for love, because it was a dream, and I just had really like very specific snippets of information from it. But by the time I wrote the book, Armand was the devil from the beginning. I don't know if that was something that I pulled from the dream, but I that was the intent for the entire time the book was written.
Question 4, we kind of asked, that kind of blended into that question, which was what are some of your favorite scenes from the book. So question 5, which character did you connect with the most and why?
I don't know if I have an answer for this one. Jam, you got anything?
Part of me wants to say Dwemba, but like she's just such a badass, and I could never. I wish I could be like her. I guess, like in life now, and like if was in that situation in hell, yeah. But I mean, I'm not on that level.
I do like Dwemba a lot. She is very cool. Like, if there was going to be a spin-off, I would be interested in a Dwemba-based spin-off.
I want to know how Dwemba and Assault met. And how, like, I mean, they argue so much, and I know they get together. Like, they're fine. They leave the clan. They're awesome together. But, like, I want to know that story.
There is more. There's more about Dwemba and Iselt in book 2 as well. But I can confirm that Dwemba and Iselt met in hell. Like they didn't. It wasn't a we knew each other in life kind of thing. It was very much they both met after they died. But they're also quite old souls, so they've been in hell for a very long time.
Ooh.
They do seem very much like they could finish each other's sandwiches.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, if there was one person that I was actually the most afraid of in this book, it wouldn't actually be Lucifer. It would be Dwemba.
Yeah, she's a force to be reckoned with.
I want to skip ahead a little. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I would not old-timey fight Dwemba.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly. I want to skip ahead a little bit in our questions because all of our questions are kind of merged together. We're going to question 9. Are there any characters you wish you could have given advice to? What would you tell them? Aside from don't trust him.
I wish I could have told Stellar not to go on that journey. And, I mean, I wish I could tell a lot of them to just, like, it's not that big deal. She'll find her way out. She'll be fine.
Yeah, just give it time.
The really ironic thing is that's absolutely true because all she ever had to do to leave was wade into the river Styx, and she could have left at any time. She just didn't know.
I feel like that's... Yeah, I agree.
And actually, one of the clues that is in the early book is that very specifically Ahriman said we have to travel down the Phlegethon even though it's on fire. And the reason he said is because if we touch the water of the Styx, it will make us hate each other. But the real reason is because if it touched Kaylee, she would have left.
Yeah. That's an interesting question because next year it'll be 5 years since the launch of Dreamers Do Lie. Have you thought about doing a kind of director's cut where you put in the original notes and compare it to what did end up published?
No, I haven't really ever thought about. I do sometimes post little bits and pieces of my notebook on my blog after a book comes out, so you could go look up the DDL tag on my blog and see if I did talk about any of that stuff. I will say, and I shouldn't say this, but I will say there is a third book, but it wouldn't make sense if I wrote it right now.
Oh,
So it's only 2 books right now.
Something stewing, is that what we're saying?
There is another part of the story, but if I try to tell, my books all kind of connect with each other because they decided that they do, and so there's a part of this story that ties into another story that I haven't written yet. So I might someday try to write a book 3. The challenge would be that it would have to stand alone because I don't necessarily want everyone to be forced to read every book I write to get a story, and so that's the main reason it doesn't exist yet, is because I haven't figured out how to make it make sense on its own. And the other part of the story that it connects to doesn't exist yet, but there is more to Lucifer that hasn't been explained yet.
Is this just your desire to see Aramond and Domarin hanging out?
No. Shut up. Go away.
I feel like I maybe poked a little too close to what was happening there. I do
No,
apologize.
well,
It was whimsy. Sorry.
There's no, but it's everything always ties back to Domran somehow. I don't do it on purpose. It just happens.
Yeah.
But there's I can't remember if it's in the first book or the second book, but there's a part where it's very strongly hinted that the gods who sort of made the world on which all this takes place were sort of celestial refugees of a battle between other deities. And so there is more to that particular story. I just haven't figured out how to tell it yet. So there's more to the reasoning behind some of the things that happened here. I just haven't figured out how to tell that story in a way that feels like it would be rewarding to my readers instead of just like, what the fuck is she talking about?
Although I did notice yet, you use the word yet being the appropriate word.
I'm gonna be honest, I have like 60 billion stories in my head, so I don't know which ones will ever actually get to be written, but there will potentially someday be a third book in this series. Maybe. If I live that long. If I live long enough.
Okay, easy there, George R.R. Martin. I want to ask a little bit about Book 2, because at some point we'll get to Book 2, and we'd love to have you back for Book 2. What can you tell us to tease Book 2, to give us a little soupçon going into Book 2?
If there were characters in the first book who you felt were done wrong to, and you didn't know what happened to them, and you really wanted to know what happened to them, you will find out what happened to them in Book 2. There's a lot more threads, in Book 2. It doesn't abandon the Hellcast just because Kaylee is alive again. The Hellcast gets their own plot, for Book 2.
Interesting. See, that was going to be my question, because does Kaylee end up going back? Like, what happens there? So
she does go back to the mortal world at the end of this book. So Kaylee is fully alive and in the mortal world. You get to see the mortal world in Book 2, but you also get to see what's happening in hell at the same time. So it's a sort of more of a dual narrative. This book is a lot more straightforward than a lot of my other books because it mostly just follows one plot from beginning to end. And so Book 2 is where it kind of splits off and you see what's happening in the mortal world at the same time as what's happening in hell. And there's a lot of different threads sort of being pulled together toward one focal point.
So you will get answers.
Yeah, 100%. The second book exists primarily to answer, well, what happens when you piss off the King of Hell? And also what happened to all the people that were helping along the way.
What happens if you piss off the King of Hell is quite a
Book for a
big
book?
question. Yeah.
It's a great tagline.
Yeah. And
Great
I'm
hook.
looking at it here on Amazon. Book 2 is called Life is But a Dream. It's
Mm-hmm.
out. It was released on... Doesn't say, but it's out. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it in paperback. But this was about book 1. So we'll get to book 2 in the future. I think, unless anyone has any other questions they would like to ask Megan?
I did just want to, fun fact, because I forgot to mention this earlier. It's given away by the inside quote in the paperback if you have it, but the title "Dreamers Do Lie" does come from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, where Romeo is speaking with Mercutio, and he said, "I dreamed a dream tonight," and Mercutio
And
says, "And
so
so
did
do
I."
I." Well, what was yours? That
That
dreamers
dreamers do lie.
often lie. Yes.
Often lie. Sorry.
In bed asleep, where they do dream things true, which is the name of the duology.
Oh, it's not gonna
And
focus.
this is very specifically the lead-in to Mercutio talking about Queen Mab, the fairy queen, and how she fools dreamers into believing that they've fallen in love when she pops into their dreams. And then, of course, "Life is But a Dream" is from the Round song, "Merrily, merrily, merrily, life is but a dream." Row, row, row your boat
Across a lake of fire.
across a lake of fire. Yeah,
If you sniff the sulfur, you will get much higher.
I'm stupidly proud of the fact that's where the title came from. I'm a huge nerd, so Shakespeare is one of my nerderies.
I've never heard anyone outside of Oxford say Shakespeare is one of my nerderies.
Listen, if you talk to Ghost Pepper about Shakespeare, he's just like, he does not have a good opinion of Shakespeare. But I'm a hopeless romantic at heart, so a lot of Shakespeare stuff just resonates with me, you know? Star-crossed lovers.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think all of us here would like to extend a massive big thank you to Megan. Megan, where can people find out more about you online? As you said, there's megancutler.net and social media. What are some of them again for us, please?
So on the platform formerly known as Twitter, I am Megan_Cutler, and then on Blue Sky, I think I might just actually be at Megan Cutler, no space, no underscore, because I got there quickly enough to get that name.
Yeah, Victoria didn't.
No, they stole it.
There was a mass exodus recently, so can't imagine why. My website is megancutler.net, which Victoria just helpfully posted down below. That's where I post like all the latest news about when my books are coming out. In fact, my very first post of the new year will be my publication schedule for next year. I will have 3 new books coming out in the Arvalia Chronicles. I can tell you the titles of them if you're interested.
Yes, please.
So that will be Madness Beyond Control, Words Beyond Reason, and Life Beyond Time, which together will make up The Beast's Wicked Gleam, which will come out in December, the box set. And I will have the first Everyone's Child box set coming out next year, which will have the first 3 books of that series available, plus the 4th book, which is already written and just needs to be edited. So all that information goes out on my website. You can also find previews of my books there. I'm hoping in the new year to post the previews for the Arvalia Chronicles so that you'll be able to read the first 3 chapters in that series before you decide to go buy it. And whenever I release a book, I usually do go back through my notebook and release a couple of little things about, like, here's where I came up with the concept of this, or here's how magic works. I just did one recently that's a little bit of background about the kingdom of Arvalia and sort of how that came to be. So you can find all those little Easter eggs on my blog. And then, of course, I stream under Starborn Striker, usually Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday mornings at 10:30 a.m. PST. We have weird, wacky conversations about popcorn makers, and then I shut up for half an hour and type on my keyboard
And then we all get shy and don't talk to each other until you come back to us.
Yeah.
until I come back. Yeah.
And if I may, this is not my business to tease, so please feel free to shout at me. But you messaged me about a thing a little while ago, and we need to have a time to talk about that. So if you like,
trying to get people always ask about audiobooks. I'm talking to a couple different people because I have many, many series out there to do productions for. But I am in discussions with different people about making audiobooks happen.
yes.
I do want them to be a thing. Logistics are the biggest problem right now, but I am hoping also right now you mostly can only find my books on Amazon because in order to be in the Kindle Unlimited program, which I do get paid if you read my books through there, I get asked that a lot. In order to be on there, I have to be Amazon exclusive, but I am going to try and get my books distributed, my paperback books distributed more widely. That's one of my goals for 2025. Right now, I use solely Kindle's Amazon's print-on-demand service because they provide you with free ISBNs, but it makes it hard to get my books outside of Amazon. So I have found a way to acquire some Canadian ISBNs, and I'm hoping to use those to get the books more widely available on other platforms. So fingers crossed that if my computer doesn't die 6 times next year, that can happen.
Yeah, that's been a journey. That's a whole stream by itself.
Oh my gosh. Looking back over my schedule for this year, I'm shocked I got anything done, frankly.
Yeah, it's a miracle with everything your PCs have been through. I hesitate to talk for everybody else, but I think on behalf of everybody else, I would like to thank you so very, very much for joining us on Miss Megan. As I said, you were the very first person we wanted to do this with. You were the only choice we wanted to do this with for our first episode, so we are very grateful. Again, I'm speaking for all of us. We are so grateful that you joined us. Thank you so much for your time today. It was lovely to sit and talk to you about this.
Thank you so much for having me. I love hearing how everybody felt about everything and what came through and what didn't. As a writer, we never quite know for sure until someone says, "Oh, and I picked up on this and I noticed that and I wanted to shake that girl." So this has been amazing for me. I would love to come back and talk about other books in the future.
Oh my gosh, yes, of course. You're welcome back anytime. We love you so much.
We really do. I love you more than everyone else, though.
I'm giving you the heart hands. You can't see it, but you're all getting the heart hands.
I feel it. I feel it in what's left of my heart.
Heck yeah.
So, as this isn't my stream, it's not on me to press the end button. But Victoria, anything else? Anyone else would like to add, or are we done?
I think we're basically done. We have to pick a book for next month, but we don't have to do that right now because I don't know if anyone came prepared with one. Because I know I
not
did
even
not.
A little bit.
Okay, so we'll probably just do that in Discord at some point. Megan, thank you again so much for coming and spending your day off with us. I really, really appreciate it. Peter, thank you for basically hosting the whole thing and doing an amazing job. It saved my ass. You don't even know. I feel like I'm dying. I think I need to take a nap. Jam, thank you for being here. I know your life has also been pretty crazy the last few weeks, so I appreciate you also being here, reading the book, taking the time to be with us today. Addie, you as well. You guys are always like my biggest support system, and I love you guys so much. So thank you all for being here and for going along with my crazy ass ideas, no matter how last minute or how ridiculous they seem.
Yeah, this was literally just, we're doing a book club, and we were like, okay, cool, let's do it.
Yeah,
we
I was
just
like, hey
went
guys,
with it.
You want to do it? And Peter and Addie immediately were like, hell yeah, let's do it. This is how we're going to do it. So, thank you guys.
You gotta do that, though, because if you stop and think about stuff, then reasons, like if I stopped and thought about, should I really write this? Should I really publish it? Nothing would happen. You gotta just hit that button and run away.
Yeah. Hard agree.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekends. We'll figure out the next book at some point in time.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.